You'll always be a nobody, my mother declared over Sunday brunch, her voice sharp as the winter air drifting through the open windows of their Savannah estate. 32 years old, and what do you have to show for it? A cramped little rental and that vague consulting thing. I kept my expression neutral, swirling orange juice in my glass. If they only knew about the ocean view penthouse in Miami where I'd woken up that morning, the one they'd never set foot in, they hadn't earned that privilege. Even your cousin James just made senior partner at Whitmore Crane, Dad chimed in, like I hadn't heard about James's achievements in every family group chat for months. Meanwhile, you're still doing what exactly? Advisory work, I replied casually. They wouldn't ask for details. They never did. If you'd just taken that junior accountant job at Parker & Lowe, Dad continued, shaking his head, $48,000 a year is nothing to sneeze at. I bit back a laugh, thinking about the 2 deals I'd closed that week, each worth more than their entire annual income combined. I'm good, I said simply. Mom gave a tight-lipped smile. Good? That battered Honda you drive tells a different story. And that rundown apartment? I hid my grin. The Honda was my decoy car for these family visits. The apartment? A decoy address for the same reason. The real me lived very, very differently. Anyway, Dad said, puffing his chest, we've got a huge meeting tomorrow. Big investors, high net worth folks. They're interested in our flagship project, Harbor Tower, downtown. I nearly dropped my fork. Harbor Tower. My Harbor Tower. The building I bought through one of my holding companies 3 months ago. The one their struggling real estate firm had been chasing for months. Really? I managed, keeping my voice even. Not that you'd understand, Mom said with a dismissive wave. Real estate is complicated. It takes vision, capital, connections. Of course, I murmured, glancing at my phone under the table. A message from my property manager flashed across the screen. Your parents' firm requested a meeting tomorrow. Should be fun. Dad rose, adjusting his blazer. Big day ahead. Maybe someday, Lily. If you work hard enough, you'll know what success feels like. I hugged them goodbye, still playing the part. The underachiever, the disappointment. If they read any financial news, they'd know the truth. The anonymous investor reshaping Savannah's skyline? The one buying their dreams out from under them? That's me. But that would have required them to look past their narrow definition of success and maybe glance at the Aston Martin parked 2 blocks away. I called my building manager. Tomorrow should be interesting, I said. He chuckled. What's the play? Standard protocol, I replied, starting the engine. They'll need the owner's permission to access the property. I assume you'll be watching. From my office, I said with a smile. The penthouse office they don't know exists? Exactly. I eased onto the highway, leaving behind the manicured certainty of their gated community. Make sure security knows. No special treatment, no exceptions. They want to meet the building's owner? He asked. They'll have to work for it, I murmured. Like they made you work for their approval? Something like that. The city skyline shimmered in the distance as I accelerated toward home. Sometimes success isn't about proving people wrong. It's about letting them watch themselves be wrong. A notification lit up my phone. Morgan Stanley deal closed. $240 million, 0 cents profit. My parents' entire net worth wouldn't even cover the commission. Funny how life works out. While they bragged about Cousin James's $190,000 0 cents partner salary, I'd just wrapped a deal that could buy his entire law firm 100 times over. I glided into my private garage beneath Harbor Tower, nodding to Luis, my head of security, a man who knew more about my real life than my entire family combined. Good brunch with the folks? He teased, already smirking. Oh, you know, I laughed, stepping into my private elevator. The usual. I'm a disappointment, a nobody. Should have taken Dad's generous offer to work at his sinking company. The elevator opened into my world. 12,000 square feet of glass and steel floating above the Atlantic, every corner screaming success they could never imagine. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the Miami skyline, glittering like a constellation. I dropped my keys on the marble console, checking another message from my assistant, Sophia. Your parents' firm filed their request to meet. Confirm for tomorrow? I grinned. Confirm it. Let's give them the tour of my building. They spent decades trying to make me small. Tomorrow they'll walk into Harbor Tower with their pitch decks and false confidence, never guessing the person they dismiss over Eggs Benedict owns every inch of what they want. And I'll be right there, watching. They were bringing their entire executive team tomorrow, plus a few so-called investors, really just golf buddies with mediocre credit and inflated egos. I loosened the navy tie I'd worn for brunch, the one I kept cheap for appearances, and tapped the panel on my wall. My home office came alive. A panoramic view of the Miami skyline, framed by a wall of screens streaming live security feeds from Harbor Tower. Time to prepare for tomorrow's performance. Are the lobby cameras ready? I asked. All set, Sophia replied, glancing up from her tablet. We can record every delicious second of their realization. I strode past a gallery wall lined with framed magazine spreads and plaques my parents had never seen or never cared to notice. Forbes, the hidden visionary behind Harbor Tower. Private Equity Weekly, the phantom builder reshaping Miami. 30 Under 30, real estate's quiet power player. My name never appeared in any of them. By design. I built an empire worth $5,400,000,000, 0 cents behind layers of trusts and holding companies, while my family pitied my consulting job. Should I draft the standard rejection for their offer? Sophia asked, scrolling. No, I said, smiling slowly. Tomorrow calls for something personal. Personal? Have legal prepare a dossier on every failed development they've touched, every loan they've defaulted on, every investor they've burned. Include projections of their looming bankruptcy. Make it clear the owner of Harbor Tower doesn't deal with, what did Mom call me again? A nobody? Sophia grinned. Exactly. Should I send it during their meeting? Perfect timing. I dropped into my chair, its leather hugging me like a throne. Floor-to-ceiling glass bathed the room in gold as the sun dipped toward Biscayne Bay. Oh, and tell security, when they demand to speak to the owner, you'll be too busy counting your billions to bother. Something like that. I ripped off the tie and tossed it in the trash. Tomorrow they'd learn what success really looked like, even if they never realized it came from their disappointing daughter, Lily Sinclair. The next morning, I settled in with coffee as Harbor Tower's lobby feed filled my central screen. There they were, Mom in a dated Chanel suit, Dad in his faded power tie, flanked by their investor entourage, men whose combined net worth couldn't cover my property tax. They've arrived, Sophia said, barely containing her smirk. Cue the protocol? Not yet, I murmured, leaning back in the chair that cost more than Dad's sedan. Let's enjoy the show. James, my head of security, stepped into frame. Good morning, he greeted warmly. Dad puffed up, voice dripping with false authority. We have a meeting, Sinclair Development Group. Want to see what happens when Lily walks into that meeting? Hit subscribe and turn on notifications. The next part will leave you speechless. Ah yes, James said, glancing at his tablet. I'm afraid there's been a change in protocol. All potential buyers now require explicit authorization from the owner to access the executive floors. Mom's carefully maintained smile faltered for the first time. But we have a scheduled appointment. Surely you can't mean owner's orders, James replied smoothly. Very private individual. Very selective about who gets access. Do you know who we are? Dad's voice rose, just a fraction. Sinclair Development is one of the most respected firms in this city. I smirked, sipping my coffee as I pulled up their financials on my main screen. 3 failed projects in 12 months. 2 defaulted loans. Credit rating barely better than payday lending. Of course, sir, James said evenly, his poker face flawless. However, the owner's protocol is strict. Perhaps you'd like to submit a formal request for a meeting first? This is outrageous. Mom's tone hit that sharp register I remembered from childhood, reserved for moments when the world didn't bend to her will. We are serious buyers. Who does this owner think they are? Through another feed, I watched their investors shift nervously. Golf buddies with hollow pockets. They'd been promised an easy acquisition, a quick flip. Instead, they were getting schooled in how real power works. Sophia appeared with my morning espresso, the porcelain cup worth more than Dad's prized Rolex. "The rejection letter's ready," she said. "Not yet," I murmured, eyes fixed on the screen. "Let them simmer." Down in the lobby, Dad leaned forward, his face reddening like the sunburns he used to get on our cheap family vacations. "I want someone in charge. Now." "I am in charge of building security," James replied, voice calm as still water. "And without the owner's permission, you cannot access the executive floors." "Well, then how do we contact this owner?" one of the investors asked, the confidence draining from his voice. "The owner reviews all requests personally," James said. "Though I should note, they are particularly selective about firms with complicated financial histories." Mom's hand shot to her pearls, the faux ones she'd flaunted at country club luncheons. "What exactly are you implying?" "Simply stating policy, ma'am," James said, professional smile locked in place. "But if you'd like, I can have our legal department provide a detailed explanation as to why your firm may not meet the owner's standards." "Perfect timing," I whispered to Sophia. She tapped her tablet and, on the feed, I watched a security assistant approach the group, envelope in hand. "For Sinclair Development," the assistant announced crisply, handing over a thick envelope. "From the owner's legal team." Dad snatched it, his hands trembling ever so slightly as he tore it open. I zoomed in on the lobby feed, savoring every flicker of emotion crossing his face as he scanned the first page. This is, he stammered. "A comprehensive review," James supplied helpfully, "detailing why Sinclair Development does not qualify for a meeting with the owner. It includes a very thorough summary of your recent business challenges." The investors shifted uncomfortably, already inching toward the exits, suddenly more interested in their phones than this doomed deal. Mom's flawless makeup couldn't quite mask the flush of panic rising in her cheeks. "This is impossible," she hissed, flipping to the next page. Dad kept muttering as he turned sheet after sheet, each one detailing failures they'd buried, loans they'd defaulted on, and promises they'd broken. "How did they get this information?" he demanded. I smiled from my glass-walled penthouse office, remembering every family dinner when they called my tech work a cute hobby. Amazing what you can uncover when you understand data analytics, a concept their firm still treated like a passing fad. "Sir," James said, his tone polite but firm, "the owner also asked me to convey that the Harbor Tower is not considering partnerships with—" He checked his tablet. Eyes, flicking over the note. "Ah, yes. The phrase was, developers whose last meaningful success happened 20 years ago." Mom yanked the packet from Dad's shaking hands. "These numbers, this detail, this is private." "Not to someone who knows where to look," I murmured, sipping my espresso as Sophia entered with an update. "Their investors are pulling out," she reported with a grin. "I'm also seeing alerts. Harrison Development stock is already sliding. Want me to throw it on the main screen?" "Do it," I said, leaning back as the graph appeared. A beautiful red line plunging into free fall. My parents always preached that reputation was everything in business. Today, they were learning just how true that was. In the lobby, James remained unflappable. "If you'd like," he said, "we can accept a formal request for a meeting. Though the owner is currently in their penthouse office, occupied with more promising ventures." My phone buzzed, a new message from Mom. "Lily, honey, are you free for lunch? We need to talk about family opportunities." Ah, the last play. "When all else fails, call the unsuccessful child, the one whose consulting job they now hoped might offer insight into Harbor Tower's elusive owner. If only they knew. We demand to speak to whoever's up there." Dad's voice hit that commanding pitch, the one that used to make me shrink as a teenager. Now, it only amused me. James, ever the professional, looked straight at one of my cameras and allowed himself the faintest smile. "I'm afraid the owner is quite busy," he said coolly, "currently reviewing some fascinating security footage." I pressed the intercom button, lowering my tone just enough to sound detached. "Everything all right in the lobby, James?" The effect was immediate. My parents froze mid-breath. Their investors stiffened, eyes darting toward the marble ceiling as if the voice of God had spoken. Even the janitor stopped wiping down the glass doors. Just clarifying our policy for some unsuccessful developers, James replied smoothly. Ah, Sinclair Development, I said, my voice echoing through the lobby. Please remind them that unlike their family dynamics, business success requires more than just showing up and demanding respect. Mom's flawless complexion turned ghost white. Dad's power tie suddenly looked like a noose around his thick neck. You can see us? Mom whispered, scanning the security domes like prey spotting a hawk. I see everything in my building, I replied evenly, savoring every syllable, including desperate firms trying to save themselves with other people's money. Tell me, do you treat all your partners the way you treat your children? Ignoring potential until you need something? The silence was deafening. On my screen I saw it. The flicker of recognition, the tilt of panic, the cracks in their armor. Who are you? Dad barked, but the authority was gone, replaced by desperation. I tapped another command. Instantly, every digital display in the lobby lit up with their sins. Failed projects, defaulted loans, investors lost, promises broken. Someone you taught a valuable lesson, I said calmly. That success doesn't always wear the mask you expect. Sometimes the nobody you dismissed is the empire you can't afford to ignore. I paused, letting the weight of it settle before twisting the knife. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have lunch with developers who actually deliver results. Though rumor has it your country club is hiring staff, perhaps that's more your speed. Their faces collapsed. I watched their entourage scatter like startled birds, investors already dialing brokers to dump Sinclair Development stock. Later, my phone buzzed. Lily, sweetheart, please, can we meet for lunch? We need to talk. I smiled, closing my laptop. Revenge wasn't telling them who I'd become. It was watching them realize, too late, that the child they called a failure had become the nightmare they never saw coming. And sometimes, real power is silence. If you've read this far, I want to hear from you. What would you have done in my place? Would you have revealed the truth right there in the lobby, or walked away like I did, leaving them to wonder? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one because this isn't just my story. It's a conversation about something bigger than real estate or family drama. For years, I let their words define me. I believed their version of success was the only one that mattered. And because I didn't fit that mold, a fancy law degree, a seat at their table, they decided I was a failure. Maybe you know that feeling. Maybe someone told you your dream wasn't practical, that you were chasing something impossible. If that's you, listen carefully. You don't need their validation to succeed. Success isn't loud. It doesn't always come with applause or instant recognition. Sometimes it's built in silence, brick by brick, while the world underestimates you. So here's my advice. Bet on yourself even when no one else does. Block out the noise, build the life you want, and let your results speak for you. If this story hit home, tap that subscribe button. Not just because it helps the channel, but because the next part of my story is coming. And trust me, you'll want to see what happens when the truth finally comes out. Share this with someone who needs to hear that it's okay to carve their own path. And if you've been underestimating yourself because someone made you feel small, remember this. Their opinion is temporary. Your potential is permanent. So, what's your next move? Comment below. I'm listening.